here. Thank you everybody for coming to the, the June meeting of the Fond du Lac Amateur Radio Club. At this time, I will turn it over to Stan to introduce our guest for this evening.
All right, very good. Well, I'm going to read a little introduction here for Ray. Our Icom division manager, Ray Novak, began his career in 1988 at MFJ Enterprise. You might know MFJ, as an electronic technician after graduating from Northeast Mississippi Community College. So kudos on that. From there, he moved to the international sales, later adding domestic sales to his role as sales manager. He credits Martin Jew, founder of MHA, as an early career mentor and coach. He joined Icom America in 1994, starting in technical support, moving to district sales manager in 1995, national sales manager in 1999, and division manager in 2002, where he is responsible for all amateur radio and receiver sales, or was responsible. He credits his advancement to hard work, street smarts, coaching, and guidance from his colleagues, Hiro Nakakoka, right? Nakakoka. Okay. President Bob Carreri, is that right? Retired Vice President, and Chris, you have to give me all these really weird names. Lugi, Vice President, if I got that right. Throughout 25 years of his amateur radio industry, he has been an innovator and a leader through his and Icom America support of countless hamfests, contests, universities, Ham Nation, Meteorologic, TV, Scouting, to name just a few. He has served significantly to advance amateur radio across the country and around the world. Ray is an ARRL Life member and a DXpeditioner who has been to Mozambique, Bhutan. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Novak. All right. So, Ray, tell us a little bit about, this is all about Icom, and tell us a little bit about, we can go back in the history of 1954, the founder of Icom Radio. Tell us a little bit about the founder and kind of how it all started. Give us a little history.
Well, so everybody there will remember the Icom guy. I just got one thing to say before we get going, and that is go Bears.
All right, we're done. I'm sorry, I'm a little static in the line.
Okay, what was the question again?
Oh, Blackhawks.
Okay, all right, let's roll. Okay, so yeah, a little bit about the history. We go back, it was at 52, I think, that the founder was licensed for the first time, I think, or where they became a ham radio licensee at that.
Did we just lose him?
Did I lose you? I think we lost you.
Yeah, I'm still here, but...
Turn off the camera.
Oh, we lost your picture.
Let me call you right back.
Okay. We broke the machine. I didn't touch anything.
New
Joe,
technology.
Yeah, brought up the Bears. Everything.
It doesn't take much to get on their mailing list.
I think the Go Bears thing probably disconnected.
Okay, what I said, I think we're getting a little static in the line. I did not mean that literally.
What was that? Packard? I think that's what we talked about.
See, Stan, it's even afraid of another IT guy that has no affiliation with BBC. Speaking of the glitter.
Who's trying to call us? That's probably
The dick is not.
I should send that one to you. How to build your own. Yeah, this took them about 20 minutes or so. 20 minutes, you did it yourself. There's a demonstration on it too.
And he's back! Yay!
There he
There we
is.
go.
There you are, Ray.
Turn it down just a little.
just a little background on, first of all, go back, Ray, and just what first piqued your interest in getting involved in amateur radio? When did you really pique an interest in that?
After about 6 months of working at MFJ, they told me I had to get my license. When I got out of college, there were two real main electronic companies to really work for in Mississippi. One was PV Electronics, and since I was really into the sound equipment and the music industry, I was hoping to get down there, but they weren't hiring at that point. So put in a resume to MFJ and did an interview, and they were suckers enough to hire me, and the rest is history.
Well, you had a pretty great flight path moving up through the ranks, I'll tell you that. It went pretty fast for you, so obviously you put a lot of energy into this. As your career has expanded into your international piece here. A little bit about, you're working for Icom, which is a phenomenal amateur radio organization. A little bit about kind of how that all started out, maybe a little piece of history, just a little bit about Icom and kind of where they're at now. And we talked a little bit before the meeting tonight about the newest radio they're putting out, which is the 785051. And again, there's so many changes on that, but just a little bit about how they've advanced from that 1 watt, 6 meter radio way back when to kind of where they are today and kind of where their position is, because I think they're probably #1 leader maybe in technology there. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was just sheer luck that I was able to get on board with Icom, and during one of the commercial two-way shows out in Las Vegas, IWC, I got to meet the founder of Icom, and Mr. Inouye and I were talking about his philosophy on engineering, and it was pretty phenomenal to hear somebody talk about amateur radio and the technology behind it, looking at not just focusing on how cheaply things could be done, but looking more at performance of the product. And I got to go to Japan a couple of times and meet with the engineers, and it was interesting to see that one of the facilities that they have is just for research and development of radio technology. And an example, the 7850 and the 7851 has actually got some technology that did not exist until this product was being developed. Some of the other manufacturers have gone to a down conversion type receiver, and while their propaganda makes it sound like that is really the way to go, you have IMD artifacts that are inherent in that kind of design. The reality was they could go to a closer in two-tone test and have a tighter filter that could actually be designed and developed and existed for a down conversion type receiver. For the 7850 and 51, they had to develop and design the filter for the first IF up around 75 megahertz. So the development of technology and the philosophy of if you build a technology, there will be hands that will buy it, and over time, the technology can trickle down into more economical solutions.
Well, which just explains that, because those are probably the 7800 was about $10,000, I think, for that particular reason. I imagine these are probably still in the same range then?
No, actually the 7850, which is a limited edition for the 50th anniversary, that one sold out. We only had 45 coming to the United States, and they sold out at 16,000 on the street.
Wow. There's gasping going on in the room. Yeah.
Well, if you take a look at the Collins C line,
That's true.
I mean, what kind of price was that back in the 50s?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how long did folks have to save up to buy a brand new C line?
Yeah.
It took some time. The 7851, which is the regular production unit, that one is selling on the street for around 14,000. But there again, the technology that's in the design of the two receivers, and that's the other thing is, And that high-end radio, we're the only manufacturer that builds two identical receivers from the coax connector all the way to the audio output in one single box. Our competitors have made one pristine receiver, and the second receiver is subgrade of the first one.
So, talking a little bit about, Japan, obviously you've been over to Japan a couple of times, and they have 1.35, according to this Joe's thing here, but 1.5 million or 3.5 million ham radio operators, the population of 126 million people. How does the United States rank in ham radio popularity as compared to Japan? I mean, are we anywhere near that, or as far as the percentages, or do you see that continuing to grow? Where do you see us going in the future? You look down the road, the market's got to be there. And how is that going to change at all, Ray, as you look at it down the road 10, 20 years, if you can even imagine that far?
Well, there are two distinctly different two different markets. In Japan, the reason why they have so many licensed hams is when they go through their education process, when they go into the universities, they have to take some type of technology field, as well as a secondary language. And amateur radio allows them to not only study a second language, but also become more proficient in it. The second part of it, though, is their ham radio population is decreasing.
Okay.
While in the United States, where emergency communications seems to be a real growth area right now, the new ham requirements without the code have brought in hams that saw the code as being either an impossible or a threshold they really didn't want to step over to get into the hobby. But it's been interesting. The same hams that said, I don't want to be forced to study Morse code, are actually getting intrigued by doing the Morse code, and there's just a lot of CW operators still out there.
Yep. That's true.
But we are seeing the numbers grow. It is a different type of amateur radio operator. More of them are looking at their time as a dollar figure, so I wouldn't say a lot of them really want to get into the intricacies of building their equipment. Instead of soldering up their own jumper cables, they're quicker to go and buy it, and hey, it's got a warranty, it's guaranteed to work, where my soldering skills might not be that great, and I might not make the proper jumper, and I might blow up the radio. But a lot of these new hams that are coming in are tech savvy, computer savvy, and code savvy. So we're seeing a lot of new developments coming out of the amateur ranks that is more than just, I restored this piece of radio gear or I built my own antenna. They're doing SDR and different things like that.
Do you think that you see that as more of a trend then, Ray, into the, like Icom going into the software-defined more as it builds new radios to upgrade them via software-defined? There's a lot more integration between the radios and the computers now. I know that, my Jack. Almost everything I've got is connected to the computer. I don't have software-defined, but there's the ability to upgrade the radios. So anything like that you see in the future kind of moving more in that direction?
Well, a lot of the radios, I mean, you mentioned the 7800. The 7800 came out, when you look at the R&D, it's about a 13-year-old radio. The 7800 is primarily a software-defined radio. You've got a microprocessor, you've got an Ethernet jack, you've got sound cards, you've got USB ports for keyboards. The computer built into the radio. When you do a firmware update, you're putting in a new operating system and new modes and features into the radio. To take a look at it, the last firmware update we did on that radio, we put the remote-based server inside the radio itself. So voice over IP communications as well as radio control over IP communications is now built into the radio. If you take a look at a computer that you bought 13 years ago and try to load Windows 8 on it, it's not going to perform too well. But a lot of today's radios that have all the knobs, buttons, controls, at the heart of it is a software-defined radio.
Right. So, keeping with that, with software defined and some of the other features, not everybody's going to buy a 7851 or whatever. I mean, they're not going to buy that. But so, what is really the hottest selling radio for Icom right now for most people? They go out and say, if you made a recommendation, you got a new ham out there, and say, you want to get into a decent radio, buy this one from Icom. Which one would you recommend?
It really depends on what they're wanting to do and what they're wanting to grow to in the hobby. When somebody says they just got their license and they're wanting to get into HF, the best value on the market right now from Icom is a 7200. It has all the DSP filters built into it. It has a high stability crystal oscillator, USB port on it, so your digital modes all go through the sound card in the radio. Whereas like the 718, it's $200 less, but to interface it to your computer, you spend another $100 for an interface. You have the high stability crystal oscillator and the filtering are all options for it. So those are the two that I want people to look at to begin with.
So what's the entry level on the 7200 then? What's the range on that for somebody if they're going to have into it?
Price range, you're looking at right at 900.
Okay.
When you look at some of the radios a little bit more that have the internal antenna tuner, while it's cool to have an automatic antenna tuner built into it, a lot of new hams are putting up a wire antenna or an antenna that's fed with a feed ladder line. Your internal antenna tuners are not going to cover that kind of antenna system.
Right.
So it's better to get something that you require an external antenna tuner. You can go with a manual one for under $100 or spend about $200 and get an LDG automatic antenna tuner or the Icom AH4.
Well, that's a pretty good range. That's a pretty good range for people to get into that. And again, the features on that particular radio, that's a very competitive piece there, I think, for most people. So obviously we got the most popular radio. We asked you a little bit about the future here. And again, Japan seems to always be ahead of us in all this stuff. We don't have very many companies that make radios in the U.S. anymore. Very, very few. Japan really seems to be leading the market. And why is that? I think they've always been, in the old days, some of the old timers are here remember that too. I mean, anything with Japan was really basically a piece of junk. Now anymore, it's really good stuff. So what is it about their situation in Japan? I mean, other than just, is it R&D, or they just really have a keen interest in developing radios, and we just don't carry that, or is it just the economy, or what is it?
It's more of a factor of the economy than anything. I mean, you do have a couple of real good radio manufacturers here in the United States, but their layer of distribution is selling direct. So you can't go to your shop down in Milwaukee to go twist the knobs and play around with the radio net. You can look at it either at a ham fest or look at it online. So removing that layer of markup allows them to be competitive and in a price point that most of your ham radio operators are feeling is a fair deal. The other angle is offshore production. Icom has taken pride in keeping all of their production in Japan. While we've seen Singapore, Vietnam, as well as China to become some of the manufacturing locations for some of the other so-called Japanese radio manufacturers.
Yep, that's good. That's good. So Icom came out with really the D-Star. I mean, they're the first ones that really come up with that. And can you tell us a little bit for the guys here and the people here in the meeting tonight, kind of what D-Star is and what that's all about?
Okay, D-Star is a digital communications. Back in the late 1990s, the Japanese Postal Service put out a request for a quote and proof of concept for mobile digital radio. During that, they were able to do 128K bit per second, which was an ISDN type speed for mobile data. After the proof of concept was done, the technology was sitting out there, and the JERL saw this technology and thought this is going to be the future of amateur radio. They approached the different amateur radio manufacturers on working with the protocol to put it to where it would work within the guidelines of amateur radio on a global market. The thing was, the plan was just to keep it in Japan only. But when I came back from the D-Expedition in Bhutan in 2001, I got to see this technology. When I came back to the offices here in the States, I approached Mr. Nakaoka and told him about the possibility of marketing outside of Japan. It took us a good 9 months to convince the JERL that this is technology that would be for the betterment of amateur radio globally, and to allow us to market and sell it outside of Japan. It was 4 years before Icom looked at the product itself beyond an experimental phase and actually assigned it full-time engineers to develop more product and infrastructure, backbone, repeater networks, the gateway software, and planning for a global type communications. So that's the part where the experimentation, the first systems in experimentation was one in Icom Canada, one in Icom America, and one in Icom UK. And these three were networked, and we had regular communications over those.
Stan.
It's now evolved to where globally there's probably 60,000 users on multiple networks. And at any time, you can get on one of the networks and talk to just about anybody across the world.
It's amazing. That's
Stan.
amazing. Joe's got a question. What's the
How
question?
does it work? What do you need for hardware? And can you talk to someone without D-Star?
Okay, how does it work? What do you need for hardware? Can you talk to someone without D-Star?
Over the years, there's been multiple companies that have developed different products. A company called Internet Labs has built a DV dongle that will attach to your computer. The internet is the backbone for it, so you can use the sound card in your computer to talk to anybody either using another radio, another dongle, or different devices. It is VHF and UHF, as well as 1.2 gig for the RF communications. There are guys that are experimenting with it on HF as well, but for two people to talk, you do have to have some type of D-Star compatible device.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned as you were explaining this, that you talked about a couple of your D-Expeditions, Mozambique and Bhutan. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with those, Mozambique and Bhutan?
Bhutan is by far my favorite one. Just going over there, seeing the different culture, seeing an area that was completely removed from technology, but also being some of the most advanced. Kids over there, where I remember growing up, we had 3 channels, and if the president was talking, he was on all 3. Over there, kids are seeing 200 plus channels, fully digitally clear. They either have a signal or they don't. They don't know what it's like to put tin foil on rabbit ears. Just the whole thing about the technology. But the one that was the most challenging was the one that we went to Bhutan, having to deal with the different to Mozambique, dealing with the different cultures, the amount of corruption in the government there. Every checkpoint that we went through relied on lining some officer's pocket just because he was standing there in uniform with an AK-47 and because he said so. But once we got there, the operating conditions, it was a challenge. In fact, one of the most memorable parts of it was around midnight when we were changing shifts. We're running roughly 600 watts on 4 different stations. we started seeing sparks come from the electrical pole. And what was happening is, because we were right on the ocean, between the water and the salt, all the hardware had corroded, and the electrical pole became conductive. And looking down the power lines, we saw 4 other poles where sparks and flames were coming out because of the resistance and the current flow through the insulator. By the next morning, the top 2 wires, the insulator had burned completely through the pole and were just hanging there. We were able to get the electrical crew to come out. There were 15 guys loaded up in the back of a Toyota Tundra with what normally you would see ladders for painting crews. There was a 20-foot electrical pole. They took a handsaw, sawed off about 3 feet above the ground the other electrical pole, while 2 guys dug a hole to put the other pole in. And the 15 guys we got to see, we were thinking it was unionized, where 2 guys doing all work but 13 supervisors. They actually took all 15 guys to lift it off of the pickup truck and to set it into the hole. The top electrician climbed all the way up to the top and set all the electrical wiring and everything, but some of the photos of the hardware and the rust was just unbelievable.
Wow. Incredible. Well, Bhutan was fun, but Mozambique was a real experience you will never forget, I'm sure.
Not at all.
Oh, no. So, listen, we want to know a little bit about your ham shack. What do you got in your ham shack? What's it look like? And what kind of antenna are you running? And all that good stuff.
Oh, well, I've got a laundry list of equipment. I've got a 75-foot crank-up tower, a Force 12C C3S, a Cushcraft A4S, a couple of 20-meat Aggies. I run a 7700, but unfortunately all of it's in the garage because I live in HOAs.
Uh-oh.
So nothing up at home. But my wife likes it that way because I'm gone. I do roughly 32 shows a year, so I'm gone 32 weekends. If I tried to tell her I was going to do ham radio on one of the weekends that I was home, it would result in physical harm.
Or you'd be living in the garage, I suspect, and that would be your house, right?
We got married about 5 years ago, and the first time she really looked inside the garage, and there's a couple of generators. There's at least 10 rolls of LMR 400 at 50 feet. Maybe 10 50-foot extension cords, 3 tents, multiple push-up masts. She says, we're going to have a huge garage sale. I'm going to invite all your ham buddies over. She got licensed. I had her go to a couple of MCOM training courses and started hearing about some of the drills out here that we were doing. And on my commute home, I get to see Mount Rainier, which is this beautiful glacier-covered active volcano. All the drills are about not if it goes off and erupts, but when it will erupt. After going through those MCOM classes, she says, I now understand you don't have to sell any of it. I'm like, yes. But unfortunately, nowhere to put it up. But the ham shack that we have here is a real nice contest station. We got a 75-foot tower. We're taking that, it's under construction right now. We had an antenna failure. We're pulling down an old antenna, and we're putting up a new Force 12 tri-bander with warp bands, also 40-meter rotatable dipole, and a 6-meter ANOVA antenna. And the goal is to have it where we can either have a real nice multi-single contest station, or for events like field day or special events, we can run 2 of the 1 kW stations into the same antenna network using the Innova triplexers.
Stan, take us out in the future, 10, 20, 30 years from now. What are we gonna, what's
I
our
asked
ship?
him that. Well, we'll ask him again. He was kind of, in the future, Joe wanted again to go by that. I mean, what do you see the future being 10 to 20 years down the road, if you can even imagine that?
Well, it's kind of scary because you still have some of your little cliques and factions. The first time I keyed up a repeater in Starkville, Mississippi, I had somebody come back and tell me I was not a club member, that until I was a club member paying dues, that I shouldn't be using the repeater. If we've got to work on breaking down those barriers and getting people interested and getting people involved in amateur radio. We do a lot with different youth groups, different high school groups, and also with the Boy Scouts of America, just to try to educate as many young people about amateur radio. I'm not worried about them getting their license or not, because that's not really the important thing at this point in a pre-teen's life. The more important thing is for them to understand we're not the weirdos that mess up their TV. We actually have a fun hobby. If there's an emergency, we can help them contact family and friends. And as I get retirement age and they're the ones moving into the neighborhoods and writing the HOAs, they understand that we're not a hindrance, that we're helpful, and maybe some of the restrictions that are out there get lightened up some.
That'd be good. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here with questions from the audience, because we're going to head into our meeting here fairly soon, Ray, but I want to see if anybody else has any other questions.
I'm going to try turning on some lights here.
We're going to turn the lights on and see if I can see people back there. That might be Dave, I'm not sure, but is it Dave?
Yeah,
What do you got?
I was just curious if Icom still makes the comic book series that they used to make.
Oh.
Put out.
So Dave wants to know if Icom still does the comic book series that you used to put out. I didn't know you had a comic book series.
Well, that goes along with the technology that today's youth have. Several years ago, I had a grandfather just chewing up one side down the other at Dayton that we no longer printed them. They are available online. They're in a PDF format, and as he's yelling at me about how inconsiderate we were, his grandson found them on the website and was flipping through his iPad, looking at the pages, and gives me a thumbs up. Hey, this is pretty cool.
Sounds about right.
But the thing was, the grandfather goes, geez, there's something else to keep his head buried in it. And I'm like, well, when you were his age, did your grandparents complain about how your head was buried in front of the radio, listening to the Lone Ranger? And he just looked at me and smiled. He goes, yeah, I remember those days. I go, that's his portal to the world. When he gets into his 20s and 30s, there's going to be new technology that's going to make that obsolete. Embrace his technology, learn his world. Maybe there's a connection that both you guys can enjoy, because he can help you find some of the cool websites that has World War II aircraft that, according to your cap, you flew. There's cool stuff out there that let him play around with it. Maybe he'll enjoy the hobby as much as you do, instead of being turned off because he was told he shouldn't be using that iPad to control his radio or to develop the next great SR mode.
That was a great answer. That was a great answer.
And so, in short,
And
they're not in publication per print, but they are still being publicized electronically.
so they're not in print, but they're still being publicized as PDFs. You're nodding. Okay, so they're still making them as PDF. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, we haven't put out a new one, but it covers pretty much all the different factions of amateur radio that exist today.
So I still got a set of the old ones, hold on to them.
Hold on to the old ones. I guess would be collector's item, I would imagine, and somebody will have to collect them, right? Joe, yeah.
Yeah, we
With
Skype.
them being PDF, you can print them out. You don't want to waste your color ink. Print them out black and white and make them coloring books for the kids.
There you go.
Good idea.
We Skyped W1AW about 4 months ago. Does Ray realize that the majority of the radios there are Icom. And
Yeah, we
why
did
don't they use it as
W1AW about a month
advertising?
or so ago, and almost every radio there is an Icom. Did you know that?
In Newington,
Yes.
there's a pretty good assortment, but the ones that people seem to be using are the Icom ones, yes.
Right. There were a lot of them.
And I know at one time their transmitters, the amplifiers that they were using, were all PW1s because they were a reasonable price and 100% duty cycle.
Right. And then they had, I think they had quite a few Pro 3s that they were, that were using for quite some time as well. So 746, was that 746? Is that right? Or Pro 3s?
Oh, 756 for the transmitters, yeah.
Yeah. This is a nice radio. Those sounds are great audio on the air. I can almost always tell when somebody's on a Pro Series, just the audio is phenomenal. Every time I hear one of those, I said, you're on an Icom, aren't you? Because it's just so full. Those are the earlier radios, but they still sound great on the air. They're great sound.
Oh, yeah.
radio. Any other questions for Ray? All right, well, thank you, Ray, for the information, the history, and the stories about Mozambique. I can just imagine all sparks flying all over the place, and your answer to the comic book piece, which is kind of interesting but true, that you don't want to discourage people that have an interest in electronics or that kind of thing because you never know what's going to happen. I had a nephew. I gave him all my electronic junk when I went off to college. He ended up becoming a telephone. President of a telephone company because he started playing with electronics and got so interested in it he became a president of a phone company. So it's a good thing to let him kind of run with it. You're absolutely right.
And we work a lot with Carol Perry, and she has a youth forum at Dayton. And the imagination that these kids are having today and what they're developing is just phenomenal. There was one kid that was showing controlling a radio using his smartphone.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're creating new technology and playing with it, and it was pretty cool to see these kids get excited about it.
So Ray, you would say probably in that context that the more we can do with young people to try to draw them in that direction is probably going to get them into amateur radio a lot quicker than to kind of pique their interest in different ways they can get into amateur radio or remotely use it or whatever.
Oh yeah, with a lot of today's technology in the radios, it's no longer where you have to be afraid you might not set up something right on the radio. There's always the two buttons and turn it on that does the soft reset if you get somewhere that you don't know where it is. But today's radios are built to where you can abuse them like that and just let them get a microphone in their hand.
Yep, I agree. That's the step. All right, no other questions? Thanks, Ray. I appreciate learning about Icom, and the guys over here are keenly interested in all the things that you have talked about today and about the new radios that are out, the technology, and Icom's a great company and makes a fantastic product. I know a lot of guys, most of us, I own Icom, and really, really solid equipment, really solid, and so very, very, very well built.
Question
Yeah.
in the back, I just saw.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get a show of hands who all does have Icom.
All right, we're going to see how many people own an Icom. Okay, I got,
Hands up high.
I'd say at least half or 3/4 of the group.
Three-quarters of the room.
3/4 of the room own
Good
Icom.
three-quarters.
So there you go.
Well,
You're in a good group.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Ray. See you later. Thank you so much.
Bye. Good night, everybody.
Good night.